Okay, so now we're going into a discussion of the bourgeoisie, and I can't help but every time reading this time period thinking about Karl Marx, and we're going to get to him later on, um, but this is where the term really kind of gets mentioned a lot, where he contrasts the world of the bourgeoisie and the proletariat and the workers. Um, and so, the term gets less and less used these days, but um, almost this entire section that we're discussing was something that Karl Marx, the ideological founder, essentially of Marxism or communism, okay, and he had a theory about history that as he went back and he looked at all of these classes and their conflicts, he broke down certain things in a historical way, but he thought that his ideas that he had scientific socialism. Now, I'm jumping ahead now to the 19th century, but the ideas that Karl Marx uses about communism and this theory of history. So it's not just a political system about economics that you can judge if you want that it was terrible or not, or however you want to critique it. But it has a theory of history where he looks at this time period that we're studying and feels that these tensions in society are a part of some sort of almost a laws of economics, which we're going to talk more about a little bit later. So the bourgeoisie, actually, even though he is calling for their overthrow as a communist, felt that they were an evolution of a higher world order as history was progressing. And so, leaving that now to the future to talk about, the bourgeoisie are going to be a group of people that are in opposition to the aristocracy. Essentially, they're not fully, but they're going to evolve into being in opposition to the aristocracy, and they're not of the peasant class. They're going to be shop owners, so they're not of the working class, but they're going to be closer in relation to the working class than they are to the aristocracy, even though there's going to be class tensions there. Okay, and they had the possibility of upward mobility, and upward mobility, meaning to make more money and more money on their own by what they would do. Okay, so the aristocracy were seen as lazy, that they felt they were entitled to things, while these were people who were working hard, were using their ingenuity to create wealth and commerce and all these kind of things. And they had a lot of somewhat more, I'd say more so conservative values than the aristocracy, who they just saw as decadent, as we saw that. And they had a certain kind of justification for that critique as well. And they're going to take on leadership positions within the community as business owners and landlords that are going to be in the urban centers, and entrepreneurs. They're going to evolve into what we would call a capitalist class. Okay, and again, they had a certain lifestyle with them. Now, I just kind of talked about their critique of them and their critique of even their patriotism, because the aristocracy. Have you ever noticed how strange it is? And I still have never been able to fully wrap my mind around the fact that while you had all these kingdoms warring with each other, Tsarist Russia, the Habsburgs, and the British Empire, and the French monarchy, they were all marrying within each other's circles. Many times you had Russian monarchs that didn't even speak Russian, that weren't Russian. And you can go on several examples of all this kind of stuff. So they were this kind of internationalist families, a set of families, right, that would share power and make alliances through these marriages and so forth. Okay, and you're going to start seeing an emergence of this idea of of patriotism, of people who want to be more loyal to their own location. Now, later on, the bourgeoisie is a capitalist class. I mean, in a sense, now the bourgeoisie has evolved into this new kind of aristocracy in modern political discourse where we talk about globalization, right? One of the issues that is upsetting Americans about TIPS, or this whole thing going on with China and what Obama's wanting to do, is viewing economic interests of the common worker here not being a part of the agenda of American elites in cahoots with other elites in the business world. Or that's how it's perceived, rather fairly or unfairly. So, but at this time, we're seeing that kind of thought as well. And so, the bourgeoisie and the aristocracy are going to have a kind of mixed relationship with the Enlightenment that I just want to cover more as we talk about it. Most of the Enlightenment members are actually going to critique aristocratic society, but many are going to come from there. But on everybody's minds, it's thinking about anything, whether it's the bourgeoisie or it's Enlightenment thinkers within the aristocratic realm, is going to be the idea of reform and political reform. Okay. And they're going to be thinking about the world in new ways. Now, remember we talked about the scientific revolution earlier. So I kind of want us to remember where we've been and think about to where we got to, in the sense that we are talking about religious wars that have been a problem in people's memory, not far off in the past. That we have breakthroughs within the science realm that is bringing a new sense of confidence into what human intellect and ingenuity can do. We are having a legacy of colonialism, and where wealth is being extracted from other parts of the world, and exposure, a little bit more exposure to non-European parts of the world, and European thinkers taking a thought about themselves in contrast to these other so-called primitive or savage peoples, which we addressed in this last chapter. Okay, and now we get into thinking about, what are some of these themes that are in Enlightenment thought. A lot of their ideas are complex, and I think when it comes to philosophers, I was a philosophy major at first, and I switched to history. And you do a little bit different things as a philosophy major than you do with history. Historians look at the implications of what philosophers' relations have been to history, whether or not we're understanding David Hume properly. We're more interested in how people have understood David Hume, okay, and how it's went on the ground. In philosophy, you're actually really debating, some of this complex language that takes place from him, and especially Immanuel Kant, who's very difficult to read. We'll talk more about him. I used to say I can't stand reading Kant. Okay, haha. Anyways, some nerd humor. But in any case, you have treatises of human nature and political discourses. And as you noticed in here, in the text, that there is a certain confidence in human reason that's taking place, okay? And the idea of a kind of science of the mind, and the idea of science being important, and science is going to take on this kind of almost an ideal that has now been heavily discredited by even non-religious thinkers now. I mean, I mentioned to you that Karl Marx called his socialism scientific socialism, because he believed that what he was projecting had innate qualities within nature, like that he was actually analyzing natural laws as opposed to just coming up with a theory on his own. He was simply observing something that we have no control over, in the sense of observing gravity, okay? That political conflicts are going to be seen as inevitably going in a certain direction, okay? That very fatalistic in a certain sense, okay? And you're going to start seeing that idea permeates, and to this day, there you kind of see that in popular culture. But postmodernist philosophy really tries to go against all of these ideas. But in any case, you even look at Adam Smith, and he's seeing, as it mentions, that the economy followed inviolable laws, like the movement of the heavens, the laws of the heavens. Okay, the birth of the modern social science. Okay, and so even now when we call it social science, it's somewhat of an antiquated term. You know, you don't think about history and science being the same thing, but there was this belief even within history that you could take a scientific approach to history. Now, I think it's probably fair to say that a part of this is the fact that, you know, in the past, you simply looked at everything through the forces that God allows, a certain kind of like providence of heaven. And here they're seeing that, well, if we can explain the universe without looking to the Bible, for example, that there's patterns in nature, and if humans are a part of nature, then all these different things have sort of almost like operations that are consistent. And think about this theme, you're going through even the classicism, this kind of rigid, non-emotional approach, our way of looking at the universe. Okay, and we're going to see a rejection of this in the Romantic period that we'll talk about later. A kind of almost hippie-like bohemianism that just gets sick of all this like stern, you know, lack of emotion, and this looking at this fatalistic mechanical way of looking at the universe. But that's what we're seeing happen, and it develops into a study of all these various things that you're going to a junior college, or you're going to a state college or a university. If you're in a university system, you're ultimately being exposed to a way of approaching education that is definitely directly linked to this period, for better or worse. Okay, and many of these terms that we have go back to the medieval. So basically, medieval times to now. We can see remnants of all of this in the education system coming to modern times, but with little different approaches. Okay, I think I've said that enough. We'll move on. Well, I'll come back to this topic in the next section.